Okay, hello. We'll talk now about recent Australian architecture, and there are some interesting things being built in Australia. Um, we start with this work, ARM Architecture plus CCN Perth Arena. It is an arena, a large arena, and yeah, it shows vivacity. I think the Australian spirit is well and alive, so to speak. And it is a country, of course, which economically is accomplished, so to speak. And they create things which are both ordered and disordered. And I like this meeting between opposites. So between necessity and freedom, there is geometry, but there is also asymmetry, and there is also playfulness, and uh, the unexpected is present. So I like this fact that it is a structured architecture, but at the same time it is a free architecture, and it surprises you with various configurations. Aleatory architecture is explored by many people who try to fight against excessive centrality or a monolithical architecture. So this is an architecture which has a cohesion, but at the same time is moving away from monolithical certitudes, and I like this. Australia. So it's a sports arena, but when you look at it, it could be anything. It could be a museum, it could be a cultural center. It is a sports arena. And again, I like the fact that it doesn't look like a sports arena. Exactly because of the fragmentation in various parts. And they're all, kind of surprising, and yet they come together. And I will show mainly this kind of works that are unsettling, so to speak. Of course, without digital technology, it would be very hard to do something like this. Because the level of apparent spontaneity is high. But everything is controlled, in fact. Otherwise, the plan is quite, symmetrical and centralized. You wouldn't expect actually this kind of plan, but the carcass towards the outside of the building is not betraying, the rather conventional spatiality, or space, configuration that the plan reveals. But when you look at the elevations, you don't expect to see this kind of arena, which is again symmetrical and predictable and almost placid. But the outside says a different story. This is an idea. You could conceive an architecture that is so-called rational, predictable, and then clothe it, cover it with a carcass that is having no relation actually with the core. Because you see, you look at this section and you would say, well, yeah, typical sports arena. But then you see these fragmentations which create a covering of the main functions of the building that take you by surprise. Now, the Federation Square in Melbourne, Australia, is a very interesting building built by lab architecture studio. It's a building or several buildings that serve the arts. And here again, we see this, almost irrational puzzle of forms. You would say that when you look at it, you would say this building is not finished, is in the process of becoming. It is a process, it is in the process of being constructed. No, this is the final building, as you see it. And they did also this one here. And so they welcome irregularities. Yes, you would say, this is a building that promotes chaos and disorder and, destruction and, maybe even, I don't know, dystopian values, but if we are to call them values. But I think the building is, in a way, telling the truth about what art is. It's art is a disruptor. Art disrupts. That's why Adolf Loos said that people love home and hate art, because art provokes disruptions. And the building, this building that was built, I don't know why it is called as it is called, evokes this quite well. But the disruptions, the formal disruptions, also evoke ornament. So, it's both destruction and construction. It's both deterioration, erosion, and anticipation of maybe a new kind of order that might emerge. I like this building, and I understood one of the two partners of lab architecture. He died, unfortunately. He was a tutor, an instructor at the Architectural Association in London. I think it is a very good idea to try to unite being and becoming. So the process of becoming of a building is still transparent. It's not just a finalized, centralized, definitive building, but it is a building which is both formed and unformed. Lab architecture studio. Here you have people playing, exercising Tai Chi in front of the building. I think it is, yeah, it's in Melbourne. Well, I'll show also some building in Sydney. Lots of people here, aren't they? And you see again the return of the ornament and the return of architectural embroidery. It's almost like a broken curtain, which covers, which shows and hides aspects of the building inside. I find it interesting. Somebody wrote this, they are not my words, the art of building a building for art. I think it's well chosen in words, the art of building a building for art. And here we see also a part of this complex. It's also about the return of the labyrinth and the return of the spider's web, which problematizes reason. The confidence in reason, in enlightenment. Enlightenment understood in a historical sense. The magic, the fascination with the right angle, the fascination with order. We remember that Le Corbusier hated the monkey, the donkey, in fact, sorry, not the monkey, the donkey. And he even wrote against the poor animal. He said, well, the man, meaning the human being, has a goal, and go straight to the goal with a straight line, which expresses the willfulness of the man who knows what is after, as opposed to the poor donkey who, he said, zigzags. But now we see a return of the zigzagging of the donkey in a way. And strangely, Le Corbusier accused the donkey of having no will. He said, well, the donkey, avoids the big stones, while man, the willful man, he probably thought of himself, cuts through the stone even if necessary. But here we see the return of unclarity. When you have too much clarity, you get tired of it. You long for the shadow. You long for undetermined, realities or forms or configurations, unformed and dark in a certain way. So here we have the spider's web, which brings back the unreason in a way. It's also interesting that famous engraving by Goya, El sueño da razón produce monstruos, meaning the sleep of reason produces monsters. That could also be translated, and sometimes is translated as the dream of reason produces monsters. So how is it? Is it the sleep of reason that produces monsters, or the dream of reason? And I think we should stay away from the dream of reason. And in a way, this kind of work does exactly this, problematizes reason and brings in the disorder of the unclarity of what we look at here. There are approximations, there is the neurotical embroidery, there is you could say it's a crisis of reason, and it's a giant spider web that comes upon us. It's structural, it functions, but it's also promoting a different I cannot call it certitude, a different mentality even, vis-a-vis not just architecture, but life itself. It's like we, after years or even centuries of trying to, to bring order and reason on earth, we are now welcoming the opposite. So this is an example. There are other buildings, of course, and we are going to see a few others. But I think these people did something very interesting here in Melbourne. It's also a return to nature, to the primeval nature, but this is an architecturalized nature. It's like you enter into an architectonic forest before anyone explored it, and you visualize what you encounter. Very interesting work done by these Australians. Well, I am not sure. I know one of them taught in England, but I don't know if he was Australian. Maybe he was, and I regret I don't know his name. But I find this building one of the more interesting buildings built recently. Although, of course, there are many interesting buildings built recently. So this is almost like an anti-Buckminster Fuller, although there is also a resemblance to Buckminster Fuller, but because Buckminster Fuller still believed in a certain kind of order, here you have some kind of a Buckminster Fuller who believes in disorder, not in order. Anyway, what you see on the left, that spire does not belong to these architects. Now, the rolling cube house, this is a house. It's the only individual, private building. All the other buildings I show are public buildings in Australia, but this is a house, the rolling cube house in Port Elliot, South Australia. And I don't know, it might be that person jumping there is the owner. or maybe the architect, if not both, of the building. And yes, it's maybe you could say it is a vicious play with a cube. Maybe without the word vicious, it's just a play with a cube or with several cubes. It's not very, you know, I mean, the static ones, I mean, these ones, this one and this one maybe are not so, you know, surprising. But because of this chain with various cubes of various sizes, and these are, you know, rotated, the house becomes, you know, moderately interesting. A few days ago, we talked about Hiroshi Hara, the Japanese architect who also worked with the cube in a different way. But now, years later, we see this house in South Australia with rolling cubes. Now, an interesting building built by an interesting design practice, which I discovered today, in fact, Lyon's architecture, the New Horizons building at Monash University, again in Australia. And I think they do good work. Again, we see the re-emergence of ornament, but an ornament which sometimes becomes structural, while structure becomes ornamental. One thing illustrated by these examples is that, you know, probably these days, not too many people would write like Le Corbusier a poem dedicated to the right angle, the poème de l'angle droit. Although that work by Le Corbusier had alchemical overtones. And I was surprised to read that actually towards the end of his life, Le Corbusier became interested or had some knowledge about alchemy. This truly surprised me. But Le Corbusier was full of surprises. Anyway. It's also clear that the diagonal brings in dynamic qualities to a building. So I think encouraging diagonals might not be a bad thing. Maybe the more diagonals, the better. This is the practice. This I took it from their website, Lyon's. You know, you just add an S to the city in France, but this is an architectural practice, a design service in Australia. And now we look at a building by Jean Nouvel, Atelier Jean Nouvel, a building he built, one central park. You know, he built actually not one, there are two here, but this one with that large platform suspended at the top is the most provocative aspect of these buildings. Of course, it's very fashionable now to hang greenery on the facades of buildings. Personally, I'm not so admiring of this immense effort in order to have the sunlight reflected here in a hidden garden and sunk garden, you know. So it's certainly not a sustainable architectonic gesture, but it's a tour de force in a way from this architect who likes to, you know, provoke. Jean Nouvel. You can see in some respects the fact that initially he wanted to become a painter, and there are some painterly aspirations here in this project. We are going to see it particularly in the renderings, the presentation drawings or the study drawings for the project. Otherwise, the building is, a building in a well-to-do country for well-to-do people. Um, mainly still prism made of glass on which there are attached or added rugs of greenery. I don't know. I mean, in a certain way, is la même Jeannette autrement coiffée, the same Jeannette but with a different coiffure. But it's true that this extravagant structure that brings sunlight to some plants here hidden the bottom is rather unique, but I'm not sure the effort was really worth it. And yes, at the time of excesses and at the time of climate worries and climate, warming and I mean, global warming and the rising levels of the seas and the melting of the icebergs to make something like this is maybe could be seen a little bit in critical terms. This is the rendering of the project, and you can see it's a distance between the rendering and the built work. Now, maybe in time when the vegetation grows more widely, but even then, because it's one thing to see these rather mysterious drawings on a black background, and to see the building in during the day. Uh, but this is the theatricality of Jean Nouvel, and you can tell that he had and has and will have perhaps interest in pictorial, components of an architecture. And here you see why he did this, in order to have the sunlight come here and then reflect it here, and then from here to reflect it to be reflected here at the bottom in this cave-like hidden space where there are also plants and I don't know. I mean, I find it a little bit forced, the whole thing. But it's still a building, that entices and provokes and invites to reflection. Now we see a building, the first building until now, the only building built by Frank Gehry in Sydney, Australia, the Dr. Chow Chak Wing building. It's called, it's the paper bag building, $180 million paper bag building in Sydney opens. It's Gehry. It's until now is the only building built by Frank Gehry in Australia. And from afar away is the typical Frank Gehry, but there are some interesting things here, like the play with the bricks, which create I would say a more interesting form of tectonics. This is the model. Maybe Frank Gehry, I fantasize now, or I think aloud, maybe he's afraid of doctors. He wouldn't be the only one. I am too, but he is older than me. But when I see these contortions, which he used before, but especially in the center, in the middle of the building, we could say that maybe expresses some psychological truth, the fear of doctors. But inside the building, I would say there is banality. This is an architectural banality. Towards the outside, there is more tension, more drama, but inside, and this happens in other buildings by him, sometimes the interior doesn't match the exterior in terms of architectonic provocations. Anyway, he built it. He built it, and he keeps going. I don't know, he's 95, 93, 94. Anyway, he is well over 90. Still kicking. Frank Gehry, Sydney. Kengo Kuma, of course, he couldn't miss the occasion. He just finalized his building. Here he is in front of his building. Hello, Mr. Kuma. Uh, I don't know what to think very well about this architect and also about this building. There are echoes from other architectures. This happens uh, sometimes in the work of Kengo Kuma. You can see the influences or the inspirations. Um, he loves wood. He loves to cut down trees and use as much tree or as much wood as possible. And the most interesting parts here are, of course, made of wood. But it's essentially, a show. I don't know very well what to think about it. Without this, this wood around the building, swirling around the building probably is not very interesting. But because of these swirling wood, becomes, rather okay. But I don't know. I'm still. The jury is out, so to speak, in my case, about how to evaluate Kengo Kuma. In essence, this appearance is it's not quite telling the truth. Behind it is probably a steel structure and a very modern building. So he covers it in this ruralistic mode. But anyway, I will end the presentation, this short, imperfect presentation about recent Australian architecture with a competition which took place in 2018. I don't know what happened to it. For the tallest building in Australia. And there were some big firms, Big, Med, MVRDV, OMA, and Kop Himmelblau. And I'm going to show, with a few images, the proposals for the tallest building. Super tall skyscrapers with rainbow facades and shaped like a mountain, piercing a light up cloud, are on the short list for South Bank, a new tower in Melbourne, which, if built, would be Australia's tallest building. The competition run by developer Belach International to design a 1.1 billion British pounds, my God, a very, very expensive building, mixed-use development in the Australian city of Melbourne, has drawn entries from some of the world's best-known architects. Now we look at the lane scraper designed by Big and Fender Katsalidis architects, a local architect, an Australian architect probably, is two interlocking towers over 300 meters high. You see it here. Variation, a doubled variation on a tower he proposed for Manhattan. I'm talking of Bjarke Ingels. And here is, I don't find it very impressive. But anyway, that's him. Very interested in, playing with little cubes in a pixelated architecture. The Urban Tree by Med Architects and Ellen Burr Fraser would have a light up cloud shaped hotel near the top. And this is the tower they proposed. Med Architects. Then UN Studio, an Australian firm, Cox Architecture's green spine, would have a public garden at the top. Well, it's not just at the top, it's all the way. We had seen, in fact, even MVRDV did a project housing and offices in Amsterdam, rather, similar to what UN Studio did here. Now, Kop Himmelblau and Architectus proposed super tall skyscraper. A proposed super tall skyscraper is designed to look like a propeller. And here is the building. Of course, we can build anything. So why not build in this way? We need drama, but this is a very expensive drama. Obviously, these architects didn't care too much about the present day problems. They wanted to assert themselves again and again together with the city of Melbourne. And now MVRDV and Woods Bagot's stack would have a pool with a glass window over the city. Splendid. Do you see any window opening there? No, just glass and glass and glass, and then of course air conditioning. But we have a pool with a glass window over the city. So who can use that pool? The proletarians of this world, the immigrants? No, the very rich. Who else? And Oma and Conrad Gargett's design would focus on the base of the tower rather than the top. This is the top. Indeed, they didn't seem to focus too much on it, but this is the bottom. And the bottom, yes, is, jolly and joyous and colorful and pink. And anyway, I don't know. I mean, of course, you can build in many ways, skyscrapers or other buildings. And I will end the presentation with showing more in detail MED's, the Chinese office, MED Architects, landmark tower proposal seeks to, that's what they say, seeks to reconnect Melbourne citizens with nature. Well, a select few of the citizens of Melbourne. And I'll show you some images of their project. So here it is, the top of the building. And here it is seen from afar. It says here on Design Boom that the design incorporates forms that resemble mountains, trees, and clouds. Resemble, but they are not. Mountains, trees, and clouds. They only resemble to an extent. So it's a mimicking effort here. And then at the bottom, we see all kinds of, agitation with trees at various levels springing from the concrete slabs. Even some silhouettes reminding one of small huts. You wonder why are they there, to have less guilt, or to again mimic rurality which is not here. I mean, you look at this tree emerging from the concrete slab and is nothing underneath. I don't know. I mean, probably the trees do not talk, but did we ask the tree what it feels like to emerge from the concrete slab and under the concrete slab to have nothing? I don't know. I'm not sure. The scientist says that it's very possible to do this, but when I see a tree floating in the air and with a just rather thin concrete slab underneath, I feel a little bit uneasy. And yeah, life is beautiful. People enjoying themselves, nobody works. They just fool around, in romantic partnerships. Is this real life, really? These people don't work for a living. I mean, look at them, you know. I mean, really, I find these renderings both amusing and infuriating because it's not real life, you know. Everybody's taking a walk, lux, calme, volupté, you know, but nobody works. I guess they can afford it. Maybe this is the future where forget the 1 billion people who have nothing to eat. No, we are talking about different humans here who take pictures, who chat on the very, very comfortable sofas, or who fall in love and romantically move forward. And here is the tower. Well, its silhouette is more interesting than most other silhouettes around. And this is a picture rendering of the tower at night. Now, it's not very clear to me how come that that platform at the top of the building is throwing a shadow on the sky. Uh, is that possible? Anyway, they are defying gravity, of course, because we can. And that was it. So let's congratulate Australia for its recent acquisitions in the field of architecture. Thank you.